Other piece that I think is really important, and it's really important in advocacy, and it kind of flies in the face of our nice, polite Canadian thing, is that you have to constantly be trying to draw attention to your cause and yourself. So when we first started, we did hideously embarrassing things in order to get the press to pay attention to the story of what was happening in education. We don't do those things anymore, but they worked. The press got to know us. We also continue to have a very strong relationship with the media, which in some cases means going and helping them write the absolutely ridiculous stories that their editors ask them to write. We don't have our name attached to any of them, but we try and help them. I need to find, a parent in Thunder Bay with a child in grade 3 and a child in grade 9 who is struggling with this, and we go, okay, we'll try and help you. Communicating about this is really the whole ball of wax. You can do as much research as you want. You can have all your incredibly well-founded ideas. But if you're not telling anybody, you've got a problem. So the traditional media is important. We send out press releases. We phone them. We have press conferences. Obviously, social media and all those other areas, we have a website. We have a listserv, so you can subscribe to information stories about education, and there's a sign-up sheet out there. You should sign up because it's really great. And we have a conference once a year, so we have a conference coming up in November. Maggie McDonnell, who was won the Global Teacher Prize last year, is coming to speak at it, and that conference, it brings together a whole range of people, parents, teachers, school board staff and trustees, academics, teacher candidates, to be able to have a kind of broad, wide range, people from other sorts of organizations and agencies who are thinking about other areas of social health, so that we can have vital conversations about how we can work together to make things better. So we communicate and we convene, and I think that the convening is the other really important, and that's why First Call, I think, is an amazing example and really important, because it's being able to talk talk outside of the little box that you're in. And one of the things that we're feeling the most hopeful about right now. We do field trials in schools, we have various advisory committees, but we have these working tables going, and I think we've got a sort of model there with a possibility where the working table, has a leader, a kind of facilitator, convener. We have one that has people from UNICEF and the Canadian Index of Wellbeing and the Ontario Human Rights Commission and 2 different levels of government and us and universities and 2 school boards, I think. But what happens at those starting to happen at those tables is that they're a place to bring some, minds, to have a facilitator, and to get the minds to go, this is the research that we need in this area. And you can start to sort of feed, it becomes a kind of circular thing, but that keeps spitting out more new information and hopefully change that has happened. So the convening part of what we do is important. And again, it goes back to, because we're not seen as on a side, because we are not, because we are absolutely nonpartisan, because our job, and maybe when we first started, we were a bit more, picking fights with government. We don't do that. It's much more to do with how do we continue this conversation so we're making real change happen. And the reason that we need that is the world is kind of a mess in a lot of ways. So I'm just going to show you the kind of a mess slides. We've got, incredible inequity. We've got climate change. We've got people struggling with their mental health. We have a decline in voter turnout. These are just the depressing slides before we get to the happy part. We've got war, terrorism, more climate change, big hunks of ice falling off Antarctica. But it is possible to have hope, and that's where I want to end. And I think that the hope piece lies in our systems. And I think that the reason for that is there's a tendency for people to say the hope is in the next generation, as if we can just kind of turn it over to them and say, you fix all the problems we solve. Sorry about that. That's not the hope. The hope does not lie in our children. It actually lies in systems, because you can change systems, you can work on systems, you can use evidence to push and prod systems, and we already have them in place in Canada. We already have healthcare, we already have public education, we already have, to various levels in all our provinces, systems of community and social services. And I want to show you a kind of, semi-hopeful thing. If we think about, sorry, I'm sure you can't read the words on all this, but we've been thinking a lot about equity and how we, there's a lot of talk in education about how we change the needle, shift the needle in equity. And we started looking at all the work people are doing, particularly in early childhood. And this is one of a frustration of mine, that early childhood educators know really, really a lot about children, about their development, and about what's important. And they measure it, too. It's not just airy-fairy ideas about playing nicely in the sandbox. It's serious stuff that they actually keep track of. And one of the measures is the Early Development Instrument. And there are people in Canada and other places who've been looking at that and knowing for sure that kids come into school with a kind of gap in terms of, and again, not in terms of reading, writing, and math, but in terms of their capacity to have relationships, to collaborate, to their sort of emotional maturity, their sense of well-being. And what happens right now is we care about those things really, really a lot until kids are 6, and then we go, now we don't care about that stuff anymore. Now we're going to get down to the serious stuff. And we've been doing work for the last 5 years going, actually, that stuff is the serious stuff. That is the foundation of all learning. And when we think now of what you need actually to thrive in today's world, you need to be able to collaborate. You need to be able to take something you've learned in one area, the knowledge that you gained there, and apply it to another one. You need to be able to develop relationships. You need to be able to persist. You need to be able to understand other people's points of view. And these are serious things. These are serious educational goals. And if we look at this, again, sorry, that what we can see, because some people have actually been looking at this, that in BC, they did work looking at the measurements that happened in the Early Development Instrument, and then looking again at similar ones in the middle years in grade 4, and noticing there was no change. And in this case, no change means the school system isn't working on those areas. Nothing has happened. Those kids, you can still predict by their socioeconomic status how they're going to be doing in those areas when they hit grade 4. There was a really big study done in the United States that said, and there are other studies now showing this too, that it's actually those measures, those aspects, are more predictive of whether or not kids are going to go on and be successful in post-secondary in their lives. They're more predictive than anything. But we still have a tendency to ignore them for the nice, we love the up good, down bad graph, and we want that to kind of capture all of education. So for us, one of the things we're wondering is, when we think about the equity needle, maybe the problem isn't that we're not moving it, it's that we have the wrong needle. That if we keep just measuring whether or not we're getting the scores up in reading, writing, and math. Again, reading, writing, and math are incredibly important, and we need to focus on those. I am not saying they're not important. I am saying, though, that if we keep using that as our be-all and end-all for how we measure overall success in education, we think we're missing the boat, and we actually have to change what we measure. So back to the hope. Can I do it this way? Look, I can. Again, it lies in our systems and in our capacity to work together to be able to think about it in that way and to focus on those structures and to do a way, way, way better job. I was listening to a high school teacher at dinner last night, and I got really depressed about why haven't we figured this out? Like, why doesn't everybody in the world know that public education is the greatest thing that we have in Canada? And Canadians love boasting about the fact that we have public health care, which is really, really great, but they don't boast at all about the fact that we have public education. There are lots of public education. There are lots of things wrong with it. it's not keeping up with the changes in the world. There are lots of things that need to change. I think BC is doing an amazing job in trying to address some of that, notwithstanding the bumps that they're getting to. But we need to do a better job now, I think, being able to think structurally about what needs to change, being able to be advocates out there in the world and yelling a lot about this, trying to get the world to understand that if we keep arguing we have to cut taxes more, that, that there's a more cognitive dissonance there. I want the system to work better. I don't want to pay taxes. Well, that's not going to happen. So I think that collectively we can start to do this. And I think that it's partly trying to make public education sexier than it is, because people mostly think it's really boring. And because children aren't cute, I said this last night, children between like 6 and 18 aren't cute. Even early childhood education gets kind of more, they're babies. They're cute. We care about them. Post-secondary gets attention because they're going to get the jobs and be the leaders. And we miss out this incredible thing that we have, where 95% of our kids are, where we could be making, again, the change to make the country we need. So that's the hope. That's what we need to do together. And thank you very much.